Hey family, how you doing? Let me just this time I'm going to make sure my ringer is off here. Welcome again to another video. So glad that you can join us in another history video. Now don't worry now. We're not going to, we have been kind of really spending a whole lot of time talking about the Sephardic Jews and all of that. And for now, we're going to put a pause on that because I think the point has been made very clear, very clearly that no, we did not descend from those of us in the transatlantic slave trade in the diaspora. We didn't come out of the Sephardic Jews. I mean, the fact that you have people out here who actually believe that, I mean, it's really something, because again, you're also talking about such a small amount of people, that were even that makes up that demographic in the first place. And no, not at all. So I think we've done a lot of work on that. And so if there's anything else of significance that I come across on that topic, we'll definitely revisit it. But I think we can move on. And in this video, we're actually going to take a trip back to here in the United States. And we're going to look at some things, something that's really, I was actually looking forward to doing this particular video here. So I know you guys will, I'm sure you'll enjoy it as well. Now, there will be some reading. Okay, I know that some people get very bored with the reading, but I'm trying to, this is how you learn. This is how you get the information that you need to get so that you can keep things in its most fullest context. So you, at the end of the day, you could take this information, you can process it without all the extras, that people tend to add to things, So yeah, like in all of our videos, we take the time and we'll show you this is the title, right? And here are the footnotes. You can look them up on your own, okay? And I know I've heard someone out there saying something like I'm using secondary information, which is, no, this is, well, I mean, primary would be, I guess, if you're getting it from the actual people themselves, but it's kind of hard for us to do that. So everything for the most part here is going to be secondary, but you want to make sure that it's been vetted. Number one, you want to also make sure that, when you can, you're using peer reviewed information when you can. And also too, it's very beneficial to get it from the people themselves. I mean, whoever you're studying. In this particular case, we're talking about the Congo, people of the Congo, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's what you do. So again, this whole notion of unless you're using a book from 1290, it's not accurate is ludicrous. And anybody that has studied history will know that. The more newer books that you may come across, today, they not only include that information, the older information from 1290 or whatever, but other information that's been collected over the years. And so that is very helpful so that we can get a more holistic look at what we're studying. You understand what I'm saying? So don't let anybody kind of sway you on that. And I've had a couple of people come in the comments and bring that up. And I'm like, did you even bother to look at the footnotes? And usually that's when the conversation goes very quiet because I know people ain't doing that. So, but we are looking at these things. And so, like I said, again, never make a decision just based simply off of some guy on YouTube. And I'm talking about me, but always look at these things up on your own, do your own research and come up with your own conclusions. It's just as simple as that. So anyway, so today we're just going to jump right in it. Okay. So let's see. So what I do, let's see. So let me bring this up here. This map again, just so for those that did not remember this map that we did, I will put the link in the description. I'll put the link in the description again for those that don't know. This was a map that we did, and what we did was basically traced, the approach that we're taking. We're not starting off with we're defining ourselves as Hebrews, and then we're going to construct a whole thing around it and find pieces throughout history to try to build on that case. No, you don't do that. That's not even being honest. What you do is you start off with your own line. You understand what I'm saying? And you start off with your own history. We don't have to look for someone else's history and latch on it. No, that's not how it works. Okay. You just look at your own line. Okay. This is why on here, on this platform, we don't get caught up even in the DNA stuff. I know many of you have seen that, all the DNA stuff. The Bible is so clear. You know, in the scriptures, it talks about don't get caught up in endless genealogies. But you have people who are doing that and they're sword fighting over genealogies. You don't have to get caught up in it. And what am I talking about? Because you have some people who say, well, I had my DNA test taken and it doesn't show that I'm E1BA, or it doesn't show it has this or that or what. Oh, who am I? You know, get caught up in it. And I'm like, why are you getting caught up in it? Just look at your own history. That's all you got to do. Okay. And so anyway, let's just get into it. So again, we're just looking at this pure history. That's all we're doing, just pure history. So as we have said in the past, is that when you look at the first and second waves of the transatlantic slave trade, you know, that is the slaves that were coming from the continent of Africa over here, not just to the United States, but in South America, in the Caribbean, all over. You will find all kinds of markers that reflect that. And so all of these markers that you see, like the ones that are marked in yellow, these are places with Bantu names. And it's literally, as you can see, they're all over, right? And then what's in blue are towns and cities named after either Congo or Angola. I think there's one named after Luango as well, if I'm not mistaken. So you'll find all kinds of stuff there. And then you also have land like rivers and streams and lakes. You also have roads, these things right here. These are roads that have Bantu names. Yes, they're Bantu names. If you zoom in enough, I said zoom in. If you zoom in on these, you really have to zoom in. I also included in here the definitions. You know, in other words, you have the names, right? And then if you zoom in, let's see, I'm going to click on this one here. Okay, this is Lobeco, South Carolina. And as you know, in Lobeco, in South Carolina, you know, that was the greatest, a huge amount of slaves that came in Charleston, or in that time it was Charlestown, South Carolina, slaves that were coming out of Angola and Congo. Huge amount. So anyway, so Lobeco, it comes from the Bantu word here. It's Lobaku. It means steal, take by stealth, nibble away at. And you'll find us all over the place, all across the in many parts of the United States. On the eastern side of the United States, you'll see that. But wait, there's more. It's not just there, because I haven't even gotten into Canada yet. I've been so busy with other things. You have in Mexico, and this is not all of it, family. I just haven't had the time to go through all of this stuff. All here in El Congo, in Mexico. Let's see, what is this? El Congo and El Salvador, El Congo and Nicaragua. You have Congo Mountains in Jamaica. You have Congo Town in Bahamas. You have El Congo in Dominican Republic. It's another one hiding behind there. What's this? In Trinidad, you have Congo Hill Trace. And then you go over here in Africa. Of course, you got all kinds of stuff. But also here in India, because, our people were scattered over there too. Some of these names here, you go down here. Is this in Indonesia? All over the place. So, yeah, I'll put the link down. And, we're very serious and we're very committed to all of this, so that, because when I do this, also think about our younger people too, who are homeschooling or whatever. You can come here and you can actually take a look. If you're doing your studies, you can see for yourself, So many of us in this transatlantic slave trade can, in fact, trace our roots to these people out of the kingdom of Congo. Again, as I said before, and I'll continue to say it, were the people out of the kingdom of Congo the only ones? No, there were other people scattered within the continent of Africa who also were caught up in the slave trade. But the initial people, by and large, if you go back to the other videos, was in fact the people out of the kingdom of Congo. And a lot of times, and this is another point I always want to reiterate, is when you hear people saying, yeah, we came out of the west coast of Africa, the west coast of Africa. Isn't it interesting how typically we just think of this area right here as the west coast? Now, that is the west coast of Africa, yes, but it's only part of it. The west coast of Africa is the west coast of Africa, meaning pretty much all the way down from up here, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. This is all the west coast. Okay, so don't just think in terms of Ghana. We all came out of Ghana, because it's not true. Okay, that was a significant slave port, but it wasn't the only one. Okay, it was significant slave ports all up and down the west coast of Africa. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move further in our discussion on this, what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to show you this video first, okay? What we're going to learn about in this video is this one of the center individuals, because we're going to learn about an individual. Now we're back in America now, okay? We're going to learn about this individual his name was known as Dave the Potter. Dave the Potter. And he has a very interesting story. He's actually going to serve as a doorway, if you will, to something much bigger that I think many of you will be very excited about. Just as a recap too, and when I say recap, what kind of started us on this whole journey here of what we're going to be learning about. And I'm going to show you how it's connected this evening to this evening's video, or today's video, whenever you're watching it. Let me go here to here. Okay. So this kind of took our journey, because, if you've been on our platform, that's all we do. We just be history, just digging. In that church in Savannah, we talked about this new discovery, what was new to us. And it's actually on their website. It's actually on their website. This Congogram, Congogram. Wow. Congo cosmogram. Sorry about that. And underneath here, well, they served as air holes, yes, but it's also in a very interesting design. And it's if you go to, let me see if I have that up here. Yep, I do. Pull this up here. Right here. So I'm not at the website. You can go to the First African Baptist Church in Savannah's website on your own. But if you notice, this symbol is so significant to this church. They actually used it as a logo for their church right there. It's kind of hard to get around that, and I don't know, through some talkings or whatever. I've heard people trying to talk around that. I'm like, no, that's the Congo cosmogram. And they're actually using it as a logo. So it's quite interesting. The people out here who were once lionizing this church as, oh, it's just absolute holy ground. And, the slaves that came through this church were, they loved the Most High so much that they etched on the side of the pews in Hebrew, whatever it was they said it said. But then when this came out, literally it's flipped upside down. Now, all of a sudden, these people from the Congo are idol worshipers and demonic and witches and all this stuff. So it's just amazing to see how things get switched up so quickly. But anyway, we're going to... It's really funny, but I'm not going to spend time on that at all. But let's get into the what we're going to be talking about. What I want to show you here is, now we're going to get into, like I said, the video. It's a short video I'm going to show you, and it's about his name. He was known as Dave the Potter. And you're going to see how Dave the Potter is actually tied to what I just showed you on the screen. Okay. I'll show you. Let me just jump to the video and we'll get started. Okay. Let me pull up the right thing up. There you go. And let's go. The video is only like 3 minutes long. So let's go. Let's jump right in.
The South Carolina Department of Education, in partnership with ETV, presents the South Carolina African American History Calendar.
David Drake was an enslaved African American in Edgefield, South Carolina, during the first 3 quarters of the 19th century. He's known today for the magnificent pots that he made, the size of the pots that he made, and he wrote poems on some of his pots while the clay was still damp.
The Edgefield district of South Carolina was the center of a vibrant pottery industry in the early 1800s. The Landrum and Drake families ran a kiln at Pottersville, just north of the town of Edgefield. Dave the Potter was born into slavery in 1801 and was first owned by Harvey Drake. In South Carolina before the Civil War, it was against the law to teach a slave to read and write. Nevertheless, Dave managed to become literate. It was a life-changing event, one that began to open the world and its mysteries to him. Dave was a master potter, and many of his stoneware creations were huge, some holding 25 to 40 gallons. Sometimes at the stage of attaching the handles, he inscribed his name, Dave, in the wet clay. Soon he was writing much more.
Put every bit all between. Surely this jar will hold 14. This noble jar will hold 20. Fill it with silver, then you'll have plenty.
In the 1830s, Dave worked for the Landrum family. Sometime in the 1840s, he became the property of Lewis Miles. From then until the Civil War can be considered Dave's golden age.
Dave belongs to Mr. Miles, where the oven bakes and the pot biles.
After the war, Dave adopted the surname Drake and continued to be known in Edgefield as a pottery turner. He had lost or injured a leg, possibly from a railroad accident, and he needed help to make his pots. Dave died sometime in the 1870s.
All right, that's it.
David Drake is just one of many exceptional individuals who have had a...
Okay, that's it. Yeah, they just talking about, I guess, the museum or something like that. Okay, so yeah, it's quite an interesting story about this individual. Okay, so what we're going to do now is let me bring up for you, this is going to be a not too long of a reading, okay? Let me see. Okay, so this is it right here. Okay. All right, so this is from a this is a paper done by a J.W. Joseph, and it's called All the Cross African Potters, Marks, and Meanings in the Folk Pottery of Edgefield District, South Carolina. And this is another individual that spent a great deal of time studying this particular topic. This showed up originally in the historical archaeology in 2011, and you see the information right there. So this is a person that spent a great deal of time studying this particular topic. So let's go ahead and get into it, okay? And like I said, again, family, listen, it's not a whole lot of reading, okay? And I'm saying that, I know for a lot of you, you're fine, but some people, they just tune out. And but it's just all very important because it's going to be some reading, and then we're going to get to some other interesting things here, okay? Okay, so here's the abstract. It says African Americans were integral to the stoneware manufacturing district that developed around Edgefield, South Carolina. Enslaved African Americans worked as potters at several of the Edgefield shops, and the most renowned potter of the district was an enslaved African American named Dave, who incorporated poetic verse onto some of the pottery he made, as well as other marks, including an X and slashes. A cross mark was also associated with two of the potteries in the district where Dave had once worked, the Reverend John Landrum pottery and the subsequent operation of this pottery by Reverend Landrum's son, Benjamin Franklin Landrum. This cross in circle mark, known as the Landrum cross, resembles the African Congo cosmogram, the Kinga. The Landrum cross, as well as Dave's use of the X and slashes, may be representations of the African symbols brought to the New World and found archaeologically in other settings and contexts. This paper looks at the African American presence in Edgefield, Landrum's crosses, and Dave's use of the cross mark to examine the meaning of these marks and their potential expression of African American identity. All right, so let's jump in. Okay, so this introduction here, I made this jar all of cross. If you don't repent, you will be lost. This is what Dave wrote, okay? Is one of the 27 known verses inscribed on stoneware of the Edgefield District, South Carolina, by the potter Dave, also known as Dave Drake, Dave of the Hive, and Dave Pottery. All right, skip over here to this side. In addition to the verse, Dave's work is frequently marked by other characteristics and signs. The initials LM for his owner, Lewis Miles, and signature of his name, Dave. Production dates, paired slash marks, circle pronunciations, let's see, a U-shaped symbol, deep fingerprints at the bases of handles, and inscribed X's. X marks and an cross and circle mark known as the Landrum cross were used on ceramics made at the Reverend John Landrum and Benjamin Franklin Landrum potteries, and the Landrum cross resembles an African symbol known as the Congo cosmogram or the Congo. Let's see, an African ideological motif expressing the relationship between the present and the afterlife. And let's see, similar marks have been recorded on southern African American colonial wares, and the X cross marks have been found archaeologically in a number of African American contexts. Both the X and the cross and circle marks have European as well as African contexts and meanings. The recognition of these symbols on Edgefield stoneware expands their vocabulary and provides further insight into the meaning of these marks and African American identity in Edgefield pottery. Let me stop here for a second because I do want to mention something real quick too. Let me go back to my slides here, and I'm gonna switch up to this. So this is a very basic version of the Congo cosmogram. Okay, and you start off on your right. You know, the black dot. I believe that represents birth, and then you move on to life, like your current life, and then there's death at the end, and then when you go follow the arrow, that represents the afterlife. That's the basic cosmogram. Okay, that's the basic one. For many of you who, if you do a quick Google search, you're going to find all kinds of versions of these that have a lot of other meanings to it, added to it, and all of that stuff. And, you got to go to the source, you got to. And that's why for me, I'm not telling people take this and put it on a shirt or pray to it, put on your wall or anything like that. We're just kind of getting to know a little bit about this, but we're not in this video. We're not going to get into the meanings and all that other stuff. In this video, we're just actually looking and finding other places where this symbol pops up. That's all we're doing. So we're not going to get into all that other stuff with that. And I would definitely encourage, I'm speaking more so for our people, here in the West, before you put your mouth on something, really make sure especially something like this, you are, talking to people who are on the continent that may know a little bit more about it, but also you want to make sure that these people are filled with his spirit, the Most High Spirit. You understand what I'm saying? And there are people out there who are filled with the Spirit and can explain this one way or the other, whether if it's good or not or whatever. You understand what I'm saying? But you don't want to, don't go into these waters and diving into that. So I'm just telling you, just so you know. But in this video, all we're simply doing is got our magnifying glass and we're looking at other points in history where this symbol has popped up. And we're going to find something in this particular expedition that we're doing in this video. At the end of it is going to be quite interesting. Okay, so let's continue on in what we were talking about. Let me see. Scroll down here. Lots of great information in here. You can, on your own time, you can look into this. Anyway, Landrum crosses and other X's. Documentation on the Landrum cross and other cross marks found on pottery of the Edgefield district is taken from a number of sources. And they talk about how through this, the Landrum, I'll just say Mr. Landrum's kilns, hope I'm saying that right. You know, he had, you could see these X's around in that area. All right. So anyway, let me jump over to the other side. Circle and crosses. Circle and cross and X marks appear on Edgefield pottery in three primary contexts. Cross and X marks, including circle and cross versions found at the Reverend John Landrum's pottery. The Landrum cross, formed by a cross and circle motif and found on the B.F. Landrum pottery, and Dave's use of the X found on pottery he produced at the Lewis Miles pottery. Cross/X marks appear less frequently at other Edgefield potteries. So where Dave worked, this is where you saw these X's in circles. You saw them like all over in that area. But once you start spreading out outside or beyond Edgefield in these pottery areas, these pottery factory, little, whatever you want to call it, manufacturing hubs, you didn't see them using it as much at all. If in some cases, not even at all. So anyway, let me skip down. Let me skip over that, and let me go here because we're going to come back to that in a moment. Now, they did a whole breakdown, and so they're showing you here all the pottery that Dave made, and he always put an X by it, which was quite interesting. All of these right here. So this is a chart that just shows it. Okay, all the places where he put an X on it. All right, so let me keep on scooting down here. We're almost finished. I told you it's not going to be too much reading in this. Okay. While the Landrum crosses do not appear to represent production marks, the same cannot be said of Dave's use of the X symbol. As noted above, there is a strong, although not absolute, association between this symbol and the pottery turned by Dave. Since Dave also signed pieces marked with an X with his name, however, Dave's use of the X does not strictly represent a production mark. Rather, it represents a symbol commonly found on the production of this particular potter, but one that does not solely identify a piece of as his work, since some X mark pottery was also signed. Okay, so again, it's not what they're saying. What they're saying here, and if you read before, what they were basically saying is, it wasn't, sometimes you would have potters that will put an X there as kind of like a production mark when they were making it. So I'll go up here. It talks about it a little bit. The Holcombs identified several production marks from the excavations at the Pottersville factory, many of which consisted of an impress or an incise letter. Single letters appear to have been most common, as well as a letter with an associated character or mark. Production marks were usually found near a vessel's base in a relatively obscure location, and only one mark was used to indicate a vessel's maker. So you did have times where, people who made potters, they would put an X there. But what they're saying is Dave, his use of it, it doesn't appear that it had anything to do with just simple production. It was almost like he was messaging, so to speak. Okay. Let me continue here. Dave's use of the X mark is always singular, so it does not reflect capacity. As with the Landrum crosses, the use of this mark does not fit the defined context or marks found in the Edgefield district. All right, so again, it's a slight difference here in these X's. It's not like it doesn't fit because sometimes what these guys will do is they will put certain marks or slashes on it to indicate how much gallons, if you will, these jars, these vessels could hold, right? And so what they're saying is it was kind of, when you look at his X's and sometimes he will put slashes on there, it didn't seem to fit that. It seemed like, again, it was something else, So anyway, finally, let me see. This X measures 65 millimeter in height, significantly larger than Dave's X or the Landrum crosses. Finally, an X was sometimes used by illiterate itinerant potters to mark pieces they had turned. None of these explain Dave's use of the X or the Landrum cross, which appears on jugs and jars with standard forms and glazes, and that were made by the Edgefield District most literate potter and other turners at two of the district's most successful potteries. Hence, these marks also do not fit any of the miscellaneous categories known for the district. Okay, so let me see here. Skip down here. Okay, marks of the crossing, a crossing of marks. Cross marks, X marks, and cross and circle marks have been identified in a number of archaeological contexts on African American sites, as Chris Fennell, I hope I'm saying that right, observes in his article. Now, pay attention to this: group identity, individual creativity, and symbolic generation in a Congo diaspora. Archaeologists have encountered artifacts marked with X's and possible cosmograms, as well as cache deposits, including quartz crystals, bone discs, chalk, polished stones, nails, coins, bird skulls, and other objects that demonstrate the transmittal and continuation of African religious beliefs and practices and symbols to the New World. Let's see, and they give all these different references here. Cross marks have also been recorded on a number of pieces in colonial ware. And earthenware pottery made by enslaved African Americans on the coastal plantations of North and South Carolina and Georgia, and also produced by Native Americans for trade. The most comprehensive treatment of the appearance and meaning of the X's and cosmograms is provided by Leland Ferguson. And it goes on to describe there. And you can see, here's an example here. Now, again, let me stop here for a second, okay? We're just simply researching, all right? This is what we're doing. So when they mention some of these things, because I know some people pick up on that and say, oh, see, they were idol worshipers. Listen, that's why we got sent into captivity in the first place, right? Because we were worshiping other gods, okay? Now, you will find that there was a lot of activity. Now, if you want to jump back to the video that we did on Judah, there's another one I can do on the Kingdom of Ouida. I may do that a little bit later, but it goes into just how deep the stuff they were doing there. I mean, really doing in that region, you know, which, like I said, Kingdom of Ouida, which is now known as Benin. Okay. And in the town of Ouida, if you go there today, it's known for voodoo. Okay. So one theory that's floating around out there is that there was perhaps a mingling, if you will, when many of our people were brought from the Kingdom of Congo region up into into that where Benin. Well, I'm saying Benin, but I'll just say Benin for the sake for this discussion here. When they were brought into those areas to be sold into slavery, there was also a mixing, if you will, of some of the practices that we had, that our people had coming out of the Congo, with what was the practices that was going on in Benin. And all you got to do is do a quick Google search and see what Benin is known for, which was also, again, was once called the Kingdom of Ouida. Okay, so all you got to do is look at that and you'll know exactly. So that could explain some of this. We don't know for certain, at least right now. But, we're going to keep digging here and we're going to try to get to the bottom of that. But so that does explain, because when our people were brought to these port cities, there was a lot of mixing and stuff that goes on. And a lot of those people that were coming out of places like Benin and, some of those areas in the upper west coast of Africa, where were they going first? Into the Caribbean, where you have places like Haiti. What's Haiti known for? Voodoo. Gee, what place is known as the home of voodoo? Benin, which was also known as the Kingdom of Ouida. Okay. So, yeah. So, you got to see how all these things are connected. So there was a lot of things that got intermingled along the way. You understand? So just wanted to throw that out there to you. Let me see. Okay, so we read that. Let's continue here. We're almost finished. We're actually almost finished. We're going to get to something quite exciting here. And I'm telling you, for some of you, you're going to fall out of your chair for real. So just hang on, okay? All right, so let me read this. Leland Ferguson identified 24 examples of African-American colonial wear from South Carolina that contain marks appearing to represent the Congo cosmogram. More examples have been identified since the publication of Ferguson's Uncommon Ground in 1992. These are most commonly represented by a cross or by a cross within a circle or square. In all of these examples, the mark was found within the base of a bowl, or either the interior or exterior, and these marks were all centered within their placement. A number were found within the circle formed by a ringed footing, and Ferguson suggests that the ring-footed vessels occur with a greater frequency in association with these markings than they do with the total universe of colonial wear. So again, so these markings, they weren't just showing up in Edgefield? That's the name of the town, I guess. I can't remember now. But they were also showing up in North Carolina, in Georgia, and all of that. So this was popping up all over the place to the point they were like, okay, what the heck does this mean? And so they're starting to see a correlation, and they're saying, wait a minute. I think this is what this is. And you're going to see that it's confirmed. Okay. If the Congo cosmogram was an emblematic symbol to the Congo, the cross and the crossroads emblematic to the Yoruba, and the Christian cross emblematic to the religion of which Africans were introduced in the New World, then it is reasonable to hypothesize that an equilateral cross, sometimes expressed as an X, might have become the emblematic symbol of African American identity in the New World. I believe that the cross mark was adopted as a symbol of African American identity because it incorporated varying African symbols and religious beliefs in a form that was so compatible with Christianity and African America's new social and religious order. Skip over here. His country marks thus. Now, if you look at this, let me see if I can. My blur. Okay, you see these 3 slashes. You would see these slashes on some of his on his pottery too. His country marks thus 3 slashes on each cheek. Was the description of Dave Huguin of Silk Hope offered a runaway Gambian in 1769. The author believes that this is that an expression of identity through symbolic markings was that Dave and other African Americans in Edgefield were attempting to achieve, and that they expressed this association through 4 symbols with strong African associations. The equilateral cross, the cross in the circle, X, and slashes. Of these 3, the cross and the X would ultimately endure as the marks of a new identity. So he talked about earlier how some of the slaves would actually have slashes on their face to represent their people, right? And so in lieu of that, because Dave wasn't really, he couldn't do that per se in his environment, what did he turn to? He turned to his pottery. And so that's why what they're saying is that's what he did. He was actually marking up this pottery as a way of basically, continuing the tradition, that his people did. Let me see. Do I want to go here? Yeah. We're going to come back to Dave. Okay? We're going to come back to Dave. And when we come back, that's going to be a southpaw. Okay. But let's dig into that. Let me just show you this right quick. Okay. Okay, so this is from a long paper. Ooh, over 300 pages, I think. Yeah, it's about 300 pages here. And this is in the name of the paper. You can get it. It's free online. It's called Congo to Kings County. And so anyway, I'll just go through this real quick for you. Okay. Now, this image here, they said this is the example of the Congo cross at the rock art site in Mbanza, Mbota. Okay, so that's in Africa, in the Congo, and on the walls of a cave, you have these symbols here. Okay. Scroll down here. Now, this next one, this is in Lovo Cave Complex. This is also, I believe it's in Angola. It could be in Congo, not sure. And the gentleman that wrote this paper, he had his students go into this cave, he said, as extra credit. And, you know, you can't take the symbols off of the wall. So what he did was he had them kind of have pen and paper or pencil and paper and draw to the best of their ability what they saw. And these are all these multiple X's that showed up that they saw. Look at all these different variations that were in the cave. Okay. Some of these aren't X's, but you have like some of this one here, plate 234. That's not an X, but nonetheless, they're interesting symbols. And the thing about symbols too, you got to keep in mind when you get into ancient languages, we didn't always start off with writing things down. I mean, there were symbols that we used to communicate. And the thing about symbols, like I said, they're so powerful. That's why I say you got to be very careful, is that they have so many meanings in it, and they're so powerful, and that's what you see today. When you think about these, the Masonic order, when they use different symbols and stuff like that, there a lot of times there are meanings within meanings. Where they get that from? Gee, I wonder where they get that from. So that's what I'm saying with any of these symbols, you got to be very careful, because you may think it means one thing, but it may mean 20, 30 other things, So this is weave baskets, and they're just showing the pattern of the crossing, the X's, if you will. You have that as well. And it's quite interesting. They said that Yoruba X, they said they also have that in there as well. Someone may chime in on that. You know what that reminds me of? It's another thing just to kind of keep in mind. What was my man named? The man that's credited for starting the blues. Some of y'all may know. You can just put it in the comments. But from what I remember reading, they said, according to him, he made a deal with the devil by finding a crossroad in his town and stood right in the middle of that and made an oath. So that's why I'm saying this stuff. You got to be, if you ain't careful, you can do things, open up stuff, and you don't want to do that. I'm just trying to tell you. So anyway, let me see what else. And here's some more. These are just some more symbols that they found that they redrew, and all that. And then it gets into some other symbols and stuff like that. I just wanted to show you. And this is the house, the Lot house, that, it's there. And then they found, some of these same cosmogram symbols as well. So just wanted to kind of go through that. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our slides here, because we're going to talk about Dave. Okay. Because there was one slide I went by real quick, and I did that intentionally because we're going to break this thing down. Okay. This is the part I said, this is the one you might fall off your seat a little bit. Okay. All right. So let's go back. All right. So we're going to look at, now these are some of the ones that they found on some of Dave's pottery. Okay. These are close-ups. So here's an X, one of the X's that he found. Here's another one. There's another one right there. There's another one. There's one there. I want you to look at that for a second. Yes, that's an X. What's that remind you of? That's interesting. That was immediately the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that. Isn't that something? Wow. Now, for some of you may be looking at this as like, okay, I know that it looks the same, but just because it looks the same, it doesn't mean that's where it came from. I know. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. But there are some things that, we should keep in consideration. Okay. Now, who is credited for the creation of the X-Men, Stan Lee, right? Stan Lee. That's not his real name, by the way, but Stan Lee, and Marvel. Marvel, that was his company, and he had some other people working with him. And I'll just show you this one too. Went back to this X here. Remember this X I just showed you? That reminds me of that one. Isn't that something? Now, again, well, again, this is coincidence. So you're making a big jump. Well, like I said, again, are we saying this is absolute conclusion, that this is the case? Not really. I'm not saying that, but there are some clues that I would suggest, that I would definitely tell you that, it's definitely worth your consideration. And I'll just leave it at that. Okay. Let me pull up this right here. I actually mentioned this in the past. How Stan Lee's X-Men were inspired by real life civil rights heroes. Again, we're talking about civil rights era. All right, so we'll skip down to here, because he talks about a lot of stuff about good and evil and all that stuff, right? And he says, I love the idea, Lee told The Guardian, and I have that article here, by the way, in 2000, as the first X-Men movie hit theaters. It not only made them different, but it was a good metaphor for what was happening with the civil rights movement in the country at that time. So when he created the X-Men, he was actually looking at black people. Okay. And so this is the actual article where that quote came from, The Guardian, okay, in the year 2000, right? Let me see this article here, because I have another one. Okay, here's another one. Here's the other one. How the Civil Rights Movement Inspired the X-Men Comics. All right, so I'm going to jump down here. This is a quote from writer Chris Claremont. All right, and I believe he also, did he work with them, Marvel? I'm not sure. Someone can tell me that. All right, so this is what he had to say. The X-Men are hated, feared, and despised collectively by humanity for no other reason than that they are mutants. So what we have here, intended or not, is a book that is about racism, bigotry, and prejudice. Gee, I wonder who is he talking about there? Let me guess. It's not the Asians. He's not talking about Asians here. He's not talking about anybody else. Now, Marvel, now, of course, they try to lump everybody else in, but the basic premise of the mutants, if you watch any of the X-Men movie, really look at it, pay attention to it. It's us. They're talking about us. They're literally taking our story and then they add some other stuff to it, but it's us. So again, he was looking at the civil rights era. Okay. He was looking at, which means he was paying attention to black people, but he wasn't just looking at this era. Okay. Let me jump back to my slides again. And let me pull this up. Now, this is also from his Marvel, talking about Wakanda. Okay, y'all remember Wakanda, right? Okay, so this is from one of his comics, right? I guess it was one of the first issues, earlier issues of Black Panther. And it says, Map of the Land of Wakanda. So if you look at on the left here, all the way here, on that top map, right? You don't have to pay attention to that bottom one. That's just a close up, but just the top one. All right, the top left. Notice the positioning of this land here. This is Wakanda. And notice, let me see if I can make that. Yep, there you go. Notice what it says here, the Atlantic Ocean. So Wakanda is supposed to be where? In Africa, right? This is the Atlantic Ocean to the left. Right? The Atlantic Ocean's to the left. So that's not the other side of it, of the continent. It's on the left side. This is an actual map of Congo. Right in this space here in the blue, that's also the Atlantic Ocean. Quite interesting positioning there. So then you go over here, and I went to I think it's Marvel Wiki, and they have and now this map is a more updated map, and this is from Tanishi Coates, and he updated the map a little bit. And so this is Wakanda again. On the right-hand side, you see is Lake Victoria. Now, if you look on the map where Lake Victoria is, it's actually, as it relates to this location on the left-hand side, is actually more towards the center of Africa, still within the range of the Kingdom of Congo, though. Now, what's also interesting in this map, unlike the other one, Canaan. Gee, I wonder where they got that from. So Marvel, they weren't just paying attention to the civil rights era. They were looking at our whole history. You understand what I'm saying? So I thought that was quite interesting. But it gets even more interesting too. Let me go back to let me jump to this slide here. All right. I'll just jump to this slide. This is a little bonus here. This is a quick bonus. I'll get through this real quick, okay? Now, this is talking about how in South Carolina, again, this sheds more light on how they found these X's. They were finding these X's all over South Carolina. It wasn't just Dave the Potter, but literally all over South Carolina. Okay, so this is what this talks about real quick. Historians argue that crosses and circles in certain contemporary African-American rituals are derived from depictions of the cosmos traditional among Bakongo priests from the southwest coast of Africa. The basic form of this cosmogram is a simple cross. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Let me see. I'm just trying to just get through this real quick here. Other representing path of power from below. Okay. Marks on the basis of colonial wear bowls found in river bottoms and slave quarter sites in South Carolina suggest that more than 150 years ago, African American priests used similar symbols of the cosmos. While cataloging thousands of colonial wear shreds, South Carolina archaeologists began noticing marks on the basis of some bowls. Most of these marks were simple crosses, in some cases a circle or rectangle enclosed in a cross, and other arms extended counterclockwise, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Initially, we called these maker marks, like I was saying in that other reading, since the first ones discovered had been cyst on the vessel bases before firing and bore a resemblance to a maker's mark on European and Asian pottery. Similar marks, however, were soon found inscribed on interior bottoms, and still others were scratched into the bowls after the vessels were fired. Some archaeologists argue that they were owner's marks, but there were too little variety in the marks to suggest different owners. Interpreting the marks as either makers or owners have serious flaws. Although we could not explain what these marks meant, over a period of several years, a pattern emerged linking the marks to earthenware bowls collected underwater from rivers. What we knew was this. Number one, the majority of these marks were a cruciform or some variation of a cross or X. Number two, all marks were on colonial ware bowls, none on the colonial ware cooking jars we commonly found. Also, there were no such marks on imported European bowls, although slaves were using large amount of European ware as well as colonial ware. Number three, marks always were located at the very bottom of the bowl, either on the inside or outside. Sometimes they were made before firing, and in other cases after firing. Number four, marks were more commonly found on bowls with ring bases than those rounded or flattened bases, even though ring-based bowls comprise only a small portion of the total number of the bowls recovered. And number five, although marked pieces had been found around former slave quarters, most were picked up in adjacent rivers. This was true in spite of the fact that many more colonial ware shreds had been recovered from terrestrial sites from the underwater. All right, let me see. Okay, so these are more examples here you can see on your screen. Okay, so I just wanted to show that. Let me see what else. I'll just jump to this slide here as well. So you got, y'all remember that, okay? Doing the X. Gee, I wonder where they get the X from, okay? Quite interesting. This is some quite interesting things that's being pieced together here, all right? Let me go to, we're almost finished here. Let me see. I got two more things here. Actually, do I have two more? Is that it? Hey, that's it. I got one more thing I want to show you, and that's this. Now, I didn't notice. This is something else I discovered. Someone sent this my way. So thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Now, this is in Wikipedia, but it's also been verified in other sources too. I looked at other places, but Wikipedia just makes it clear. Okay, you can look this up on your own. What we're going to look at is the 17th century Kingdom of Congo flag. It's right here. An X. It's an X. This is the 17th century flag. Now this is, I'm sure, this is by that time, Europeans had come in and, kind of were unfortunately pulling a lot of the strings within the Kingdom of Congo by that time. So, but this is the flag that they all settled on. I want to say they all, I'm talking about the Portuguese and the Kingdom of Congo. It was an X. So you got an X on the Kingdom of Congo's flag from the 17th century, and then all the X's that we saw going all the way to the diaspora. And we're looking here in America. Now, it would be quite interesting to hear from some of you who are in Europe. No, I'm sorry, not Europe, in the Caribbean. For those of you in South America, if you're watching this, if you've seen this pattern in where you are, I would very much like to hear that. I'm very curious if you've seen this. Maybe you're watching this and maybe growing up, you may have seen this and you've always wondered that, So yeah, I think that was quite interesting. Now, here's another point. I'm not going to delve into this because I once I really looked into it, I didn't see enough concrete evidence to really kind of build something around it. You know what I'm saying? But I think it's plausible because if our people were putting X's on pottery, then chances are they were putting X's on other things as well, like quilts. Yes, if you look at some of the quilts that were made by our people, you will see this pattern as well, these X patterns as well. And so, again, it's kind of, I couldn't find anything concrete on it just yet. But if I do, I'll put it in the community tab so you can check that out on your own. But yeah, you definitely see this, and there is a correlation with all of this. And like I said, even with that whole, going back to what we just saw with the whole thing right here. Hold on. Bring this back up here. I mean, even with this, come on. Come on. And knowing that this guy, Stan Lee, has a history and he's stated that he said, hey, we're looking at civil rights history. But in actuality, when you dig in, they were looking at more civil rights. They went back even further. They went all the way back here, even patterning Wakanda after some aspects of the Kingdom of Congo. So it's very, very plausible. I'm not saying it's 100% fact. I'm just saying these things are very plausible. I'm saying the Marvel thing. So anyway, that's all I have, family. That's all I have for you. Again, we put the information out before you. It's up to you on what you do with it. As far as you want to do additional research, I'll be very interested in hearing from some of y'all who, may have seen this pattern in other places, or maybe you on the continent, and maybe you can shed some insight on some of this stuff. And it would be quite interesting. So family, listen, thank you so much for joining us this evening or this day. Whenever you are watching this, we really appreciate it. May the Most High bless you and keep you. We're going to keep right on digging, family. We're not stopping, and we're just learning more about our people the good and the bad. So we can learn from the good. We can also learn from the bad. We can make a course correction so that once again, we can be a holy nation. Family, love you very much. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.